incorporated into a new suite. Sadly, Searle was not able to participate, so what I had to do to create this presentation is ruthlessly pull all their information together. So this is copyright infringement if they copyrighted it. They created a training development, training kind of program for ESMS. There's 4 different modules, watched all of those. And in the virtual summit, Paisley Mahern did a development update. Mike Grusing and Matt Walters did a utilities update, and Joe Carbars did a fuels update. And then there was even talk of where they're going with waterfront. So I have done my best to extract from this group a story. And because I'm such a embedded builder audience, I thought it would be interesting just to showcase some of the differences in the main features. But don't ask me about kind of when or how, because it's not in our scope. The one thing I do want to point out that was super interesting from my perspective is that we have a CRADA for roofer. I don't see it in ESMS. So I think if you're currently using roofer or looking at that, you might want to shift your domain thoughts and see if you can pull that into the facilities, because it seems like from the Searle perspective, the technical center of expertise, they don't see a requirement to extract roofs as a separate domain from buildings. I just did some roofer training last week, and they were confused about why it hasn't been updated in 5 years. So I mentioned that I am going to be scraping information from published training materials from Searle. All of this is in their training.sms.erdic.dren.mil site. It is the same site that you get to if you go to their website, and we showed you how to get to their release notes. There's a training link. The fall virtual summit presentation with Paisley was great because it not only talked about where the platform is going, it talks about their major feature and where they're moving at right now. I really like the Mike Grusing and Matt Walters perspective because it was also kind of a step back to see what's the path of development, where they're doing some proof of concept field work right now in the utility space, and then they're going to be adding the life cycle element. They're contracting to add kind of the builder catalog to the SMS. So definitely recommend everybody get into this virtual summit, watch these elements if you're interested in seeing what they're going to be doing. And then fuels, and specifically the water control structures, which is kind of their more emerging research that they're engaged in right now. As mentioned before, this is not just a silo that's meant to exist by itself. This is a shared platform, so buildings, utilities, fuels, rails, pavements, dams, and levees are all in their initial wave of implementation path. With research, there's always going to be a desire to do more new domains. I remember doing training for Builder, and they said, wow, this is really cool to have life cycle and inspection, standardized inspection modality, and a CI. Can we do this for boats? They're kind of like floating buildings. I could do an inspection on a ship and get a life cycle curve and do that. So there's no end to the things you might want to pull into this, but that's their initial wave. With this shared capacity, though, all of a sudden your site scorecard doesn't have to be manually pulled from 3 different data sets. Your site pavement can also share a metric and a report with your buildings within the site, within your utilities, within your fuel distribution, fuel storage. All of that can be viewed on the single dashboard. Talking a little bit about the architecture, this is meant to be a more modern tool set developed with a service-based architecture and existing in the cloud. So they have a Azure GovCloud environment that they've spun up, and they're looking for this to be FedRAMP certified from the get-go as a product and hosted by Searle. My initial blush from the training was how radical it's going to be to no longer have to drill down the tree in Builder to get to your list of equipment. So the strict, rigid hierarchy of Uniformat 2 of everything in my building must be in a system, and everything within each system must be in a component, and every section is a subset of components is gone. That hierarchy is blown up, and what we have are components. So what you used to call a section, a piece of equipment, in the enterprise is called a component. So you might notice that some of the Air Force terminology of their component checks is because the Air Force is highly involved in the ESMS development, and they're already kind of rallying around that nomenclature. But while you don't have the rigid architecture of system component, you do have groups. So these are flexible to be able to respond to what groups are important to you. It could be floor groups. You could have a group of things in HVAC. You also have a group of things that are owned by a separate tenant. You could have a maintenance group. You could have all my VAVs in a group. So multiple overlapping collections of your components within a facility. So within your facility, all your list of components, and then how your organization chooses to group it is up to you. Interesting, yeah. There's two main components to how this enterprise is structured and what you're going to be interacting with it as users. There is a web element and a desktop. So in the Builder environment, everything exists in the world on the web. Anything you can do on the web. It might be slow, it might time out, but it works. And then in Builder, you can download a snapshot of doing a field assessment in Bread. This is different. The web component is where you set up how things are run, but if you actually want to add a component, add an inspection, do anything that materially changes your inventory, that must happen on the desktop client. It's a Windows installed desktop client. So, different model. They looked for opportunities to address some of the overarching complaints of the Builder community, user management being one. We talked about the fact that when you're working with attributes, if you have an inventory capability, you can do everything. And sometimes it's really stressful that you can delete a building or delete a site with the lowest level of rewrite privileges in Builder. That has changed. So in the enterprise, all these different categories of elements that you can interact with, you have a permission that says you can't do anything with it, you can see it, you can update it, delete it. It's all configurable such that you can create a specific user type for your audience. It's not locked into inventory, inspection, inspection supervisor, work planner, master planner. The other element that was really nice from a user perspective to see is you can invite people. So if you have a new team that's going to go out to your site and perform an assessment, you can send that whole team to whoever's administering your environment of Enterprise SMS, add them as users, assign them to one of your custom roles, and then invite. And they will get an email notification and be able to log in and do work based upon their permissions. And this team-centric idea allows you to see people that act as a group, not just individually. So even though you have maybe a contractor that's working several bases, in different contracts, this specific team, this specific contract action can be divided and tracked separately as that team. Yeah, so you have the ability to kind of group users and see user activities as a set. So this is one of the more interesting aspects of what I was seeing. And we've got people that are much more experienced with the enterprise in the room. So if I misspeak, we'll throw you a mic. The workflow aspect of the enterprise is highly advanced. No longer are you expected to just go in and just start messing with your inventory, adding inspections, and just save and log out and you're done. There's the whole idea of managing the process of identifying work, identifying inventory problems. So in this new kind of work planning capability, you can set up a charter that says, we're going to Fort Hood. This is our charter. We're going to put in the scope of work. We're going to put in the user identities and the roles, and we're going to say, we need to have a program manager approve that charter. And we're going to have some pre-assessment questionnaires that are the same questions we ask for every building, and we're going to have all of our documents managed in this pre-assessment area. And then we're going to provide a group the ability to perform an assessment. We're going to review their data, give it approval. So it is not just, here's a permission to do a thing. It's trying to say, as an organization, how do you go about identifying problems and identifying projects? Let's try to get with one of the power users to make a structured process that the enterprise will help facilitate your business workflow. And they call it like a work plan. So a work plan, if you hear it in their training, is not talking about a builder list of deficiencies or builder list of sections that need work. It's more of this business process rigidity. So within their workflow planning capabilities, they have the ability to kind of say different types. If they're doing a specific desk audit, it has a different charter, it's a different process. If they're going to go out and do an operational assessment, it's a different process, different requirements, and you can, again, formalize and create a very clear and manage auditable structure for different workflow activities to happen. And it does take some effort to get these configured and programmed just right, because you can now have gatekeepers. I've heard a lot of people that are owners of the data not necessarily wanting to trust an assessment firm to just push everything live and then look at it after the fact. You can say, I want my information reviewed and approved before it's blessed, and takes that next step in your charter and in your workflow identification. But now that you have approvals to manage and assignments to handle, there's a whole tasks element to this. It seemed like it was still kind of in the evolving stage, but if you are a person required to review the data that came in, you can receive a notification that there's a task ready for your input. Within that charter, I like the idea of being able to say, this is what we're trying to accomplish. It's not just, go fix your data. This is the name of the charter. This is how we're going to create an understanding of what we're trying to accomplish with this business process. And you can enable or disable that kind of approval hierarchy. The other piece that I thought was encouraging for those that work in the field is this pre-assessment. There are questions that only the government can answer, and there are files that only the government can supply to an assessment team that would be really nice if it was all centrally located in that same platform. So with your pre-assessment, you can say, for each building, I want to validate my real property. I want to look at open job orders that say, haven't been completed but have been started. Maybe ask some standardized questions in this pre-assessment that's a desktop exercise, like, is there an addition? Do we plan to demolish this building in the next 10 years? Like all these elements, you can, in your charter, define your pre-assessment processes. And while it's a little bit hard to see, there is a document management component of actually uploading files. So if you have drawings, work plans, equipment lists, elements that you want to have a part of your charter of how you accomplish an assessment, you can put it into the enterprise. The team management, back to that user environment where you can say, for this team, I give them the ability to approve or reject this step of the workflow. All of these configurations, you thought the work configuration was hard before with what I did on the training before. Your power users to be able to manage all your users and what activities they want to do and how to get that workflow right for your organization does not seem like an insignificant amount of time. Now, all of that is what happens on the web. But what you notice is I didn't do anything with actually adding a component, adding an inspection. So, to be able to work with the desktop application in your web environment client, you say, this is my target for what I want to interact with. So similar to Bread, where you navigate to a site and then you say, check out this Bread file. Here you're saying, I'm planning to go to this site. I have this group of responsibilities and I'm going to execute this workflow plan. Give me a sync. At which point, you're given a file to open up in your desktop client. Or it's actually an installed zip file. So you have to have that application installed, it downloads that zip, and you open up your enterprise SMS desktop client. And then, yeah, this is where you're still in the web, and once you set your target, you can select download the desktop application. So right within your website, you'll be able to download that new target. And it doesn't necessarily need to be all domains. So when you say I'm going to download my desktop version, you can say, well, I'm just going to work in buildings, or I'm just going to use in fuels, or I'm just going to work in pavement. So your download doesn't need to include everything for that site. Because remember, this is a single platform to serve all of these previous stovepipes. So, now that you have the web application provided you with that zip file with what your target that you set to do work in, go find it, extract it, find that field app.exe, and you're off in the races. So now you have a streamlined interface that's not meant for user management, it's not meant for configuration, it's not meant for anything else, just fix my components. What do I have? What's its condition? And track that in a more simplified table view. This is not on the web. Again, this is your Windows desktop client 1.1 right now.
I have a question.
Yes?
How do you get past your neck when you're doing an EMC?
I don't know.
Repeat.
So the question was a network security rule set that's often enforced at the desktop level is to not allow an EXE to be run. So I don't know. But looks like Dom might.
So that has come up a few times, especially with the desktop application. I do know that it is a problem that's being actively worked on, and they are working on possibly trying to remove it from being just an EXE and just when you extract the file to your desktop or to a folder, that it would just install the application. It would just be it would be an executable.
No, you can't do that either. You can't do that either.
So, yeah, we'll be able to throw that out to Searle, their support ticket. We'll ask the question to Paisley Mayhern to see if there's an evolution of how they're planning to work around people that can't install something locally and they can't run an EXE. I remember back in the 90s, the flip EXE, where you turn your desktop on its top, you mess with people. Yeah, those are not allowed on most secure computers. Or even unsecured computers, any domain controlled. So, because you set your target for what you're exported, you're going to see, you can view the facilities and see the properties and then immediately see all of your components within that facility. And there is no more bread, so they're trying to work on this desktop application can be put onto Surface tablet, and with a button press, they said, let's make this in a tablet view and move the spacing out a little bit, add a camera feature so you can take pictures. It's not going to be, your complete iOS app, but a little bit easier for working within the field. It's still not necessarily required you to be connected to the internet because you're just on the desktop client, and now you can go into it and hit your direct ratings. Same, general approach. This is meant to be configured by domain, so don't be afraid that there's 5 direct ratings. I don't think that they've finalized the buildings ones. I don't know if 9's going away just yet, but this is what we found in what this is. Yeah, this is fuels. While it might be surprising, some of the enhancements that were made, they were outside of what you're used to seeing in the ESMS, outside of what you're used to seeing in Builder and Roofer and Paver and Railer. Searle is oftentimes user-centric when they're rolling out a new feature. So this is a feature set that is defined based upon who funded and sponsored and championed a product to be built. Now, once they get that built and the user happy, they're going to kind of port additional capabilities from their other legacy programs. Not everything in the enterprise needs to be failing a condition standard or a policy. So you can, while in the field, just enter a work item to say, hey, this is something that I see needs attention, take pictures, even put in an estimate. You can just on the fly, in the middle of your assessment, more like a traditional FCA, identify work. You see there's also, buttons for doing a distress survey and the assessment set list. All of that is meant to happen on the desktop client. So while I'm sure that there's going to be lots of revisions between now and then, and the building interface and the tabs will be likely different, at the end, you have to hit that sync button because your information in the cloud only gets updated from your desktop when you sync it back. And you see that there's a little box down here. If it's been a while, you're going to have to re-log in. The desktop client uses a new set of API calls. So every bit of your updates from that desktop client is going to be using the API and just shooting it over the internet to the cloud. It's not a file that you need to upload. It's just using that API. So for those of us that build assessment tool sets like Flow that use the API, anybody that can enforce and modify with the right permissions through the API, you can build it however you like it. If you don't like the desktop, make your own.
If you're able to generate inspection items and work items directly in the field, which I'm going to say right up front, I think that's a great feature because there are plenty of health, life, and safety items that we find that we need to capture. How does this thing interface with GFEBs to make sure those things actually get executed?
That is not a question that I have the answer to, and I don't know that anybody else has the answer to that. As just, ancillary conversations about GFIBs, as a system of record for financial information, they're very hesitant to allow an interface to do batch updates. So GFIBs, many other systems, they may require these things to be entered in by a person after a control. That's one of those workflow activities. You could say, hey, anything above a certain dollar threshold that's gone through an approval process in our business workflow gets entered into GFIBs, and then once that's done, we'll move to the next step as the assessment is complete. Work configuration is a little bit different, and your work plan is now work analysis. So when you still have the opportunity to kind of set rules and policies and say, this is my threshold for condition, and generate a list of components that don't meet that, that's all going to be captured in this new work analysis feature. As of right now, I've not seen any indication that the life cycle curve and predictive kind of Weibull distribution is in the enterprise just yet. So know that there's still efforts to get buildings supported as you're used to in Builder, but you can set a policy to say this is an inspection that's going to do something. And a profile where you say, I'm going to run a multi-year work analysis is replacing what is historically been called scenarios. So you can say, hey, I want to look out for a 15-year simulation or predictive analysis, because you can say in your work identification, this is going to fail in 3 years if you don't do anything. So now you can have those profiles that set up a multi-year run. I'm just, as I went through this training, blowing my mind with all of the training materials that I'm going to have to update and change. And when I start speaking to people about sections, and now I have to call them components, and then I've used to be referring to a component by something completely different, this is going to break my heart a little bit and take me some time, but change is good, and I'm excited to see what happens of it.
What are we going to call sectioning?
Grouping.
Yeah.
You no longer section, you group. And how you group is up to the organization. So all of your implementation guides that you spent the last 3 years fine-tuning, let's do that again. But you still have your output of results of what you need that's going to help facilitate that next step in your business workflow. So remember, this is not just a standalone one-step process now. You can think about it as a more integrated solution, tracking progress and steps to getting an identification of projects. We've often talked about there's a gap between what a builder spits out as a work plan item, repair a chiller, replace a pump, to how you execute and fund projects and fund real work. I think that this is trying to take that another couple of steps down the road. Yeah. You do not have to enable workflow for everything. So if you do have a base civil engineer that just so happens to go out there and update components as they see things, and they're just kind of managing that process without a complicated workflow and a charter and a pre-assessment test, you can allow certain elements to happen without that workflow. So while they're facilitating this more complicated structure, it's not always enforced. Whoa, that was exciting. Let me do that one more time. There we go. Similar to your section work item detail, you still have that ability to kind of look at each work element that's requested. It could be because it was just found in the field and needed, or it failed one of your policy rules. you still have the opportunity to say, let me look at this work detail item itself. But at the very heart, and if you've seen previous SMS demos, the team is very excited about their dashboard, Power BI capabilities, and maps are just one of them. So out of the box support for GIS is absolutely, one of their focuses. And if you think of work as an identified single unit based upon a specific component, you can now create work packages as well to say, hey, this chiller, this pump, this other element in my HVAC, also my air handler, I want to package as a work package, put together a project, and take that as the next step into GFibs, or whatever execution tool set you're using.
Would the grouping flow into this as well, or is that a totally different methodology? In other words, you're packaging at the work item level here, but could your grouping flow into this, or is that going to be separate? Don't know.
I've not seen specific, again, so this is me watching the 15 to 30 minute videos, pulling out screenshots. I have not seen them create a work package based upon a specific group, but that doesn't seem like a bridge too far. I just haven't seen it. One of the also kind of easy complaints on builders, it's hard to search for a piece of equipment. It's hard to search for a building, especially if you're not a master planner. So within even in the web itself, you have a more advanced search capability to say, what am I looking for? All of these data types along the top of your data columns, real property, unique ID, number, are able to be filtered, sorted, and have a custom search. So if you don't need your real property unique ID, but you do want your PRV, directly in the web you can say, this is a field that I want to include or exclude. Not quite a live query builder, but certainly from a building search capability, a more refined on-demand report. And after you've identified what you want in those data fields, you have the ability to say, I'm just looking for something with this minimum quantity, that maximum quantity, just this cost, and it'll sort and dynamically filter on the fly within the web. After you're happy, there's a little button at the bottom. If you like your kind of on-demand search, export it to a CSV, put it into Excel, and find a way to do the next step of analysis that you need. So more modern, more full-featured searching capability. And then lastly, reports. In the previous ESMS demo, they had kind of a Power BI dashboard that you could then filter, drill through, and kind of navigate in and out of. Now they realize that not everybody wants to be a Power BI power user. Let's get some just one screen dashboards that we can deploy and gives them the information that they need without a bunch of steps. So you can have now multiple different reports deployed, and when you select one, it drops you on that dashboard, giving you that data that you want.
So do you have to have Power BI installed on your machine to do that?
This is all within the web. So they have an enterprise Power BI license. So your user identification allows them to connect your account to the license with Microsoft, and this is a web view. So again, I feel terrible to give you this update considering I've never put my fingers on a keyboard and touched it. And I've seen a couple of smiles and smirks that have probably used the wrong language. Joe has offered gracefully to step up and say, as somebody in the Air Force that has been using the enterprise and has been involved with Searles development for years now, he would be willing to share kind of his perspective and observations. And correct me, please.
Actually, your presentation was quite good. You did drill down to things that I didn't know about. So we're all kind of learning this new software. I've been working, I work over at the in the utilities branch at Tyndall Air Force Base in the Asset Visibility Division Operations Directorate. And we are one of 6 directors that fall under the Air Force Civil Engineering Center. So at Tyndall Air Force Base, we've got 3 directorates there: readiness, we've got the environment, the energy, and then of course operations. So I've been working the utilities program as a program manager for the Air Force, working very closely with Searle in the development of a new capability. You know, we saw the facilities side using Builder, we saw the pavements team using Paver, and on the utility side, we didn't have anything. So we started looking into what does it take for us to get a capability to really address the about 25% of our built infrastructures is the utilities. So we started investing each year since 2013, and kind of piggybacking on the work that was done with Fueler, because DLA essentially funded Searle with some money to help build out the Fueler capabilities. And what you were saying with the workflows and the processes and all that stuff, a lot of that's a carryover from what they did with the development of Fueler. So right now, my understanding and kind of working together here with, because the information provided came right off their website, so if you go in there, you'll see the same things. But from what I know is that starting this May, the current software is operating off of a development server, and they have started requesting, they've gone through the paperwork to get an authority to operate, which will allow them to put the software for the web application onto a production server later on this year. So the work here is going to have to involve the data. So what is the data for utilities? You know, we're dealing with 9 categories of utility support that we have on a typical installation. You know, you get your electrical, which is your largest asset class, followed by water, and you've got stormwater, you got sewer, wastewater, thermal systems, which are your central plants that produce heat and chill water, so we also included dams of that, and then with the electrical component, we also track airfield lighting. And so what is it in our real property records to help us pick out what the utility classes are? And it was the unit of measure. We saw that everything that was square footage would be a building, a built infrastructure asset that comes out of the ground. Everything else is linear feet. So we started exploring that and finding out what was needed for us to capture that data. And then along the same timeline, to establish to address some GAO audits, OSD realized that across the board, across the Department of Defense, that our real property records need some attention. They were just not as accurate as they had hoped them to be. And that's sort of the basis for what we do asset management for. It's just our inventory of record is our real property records. So, so how do we get our utilities information accurate? And they pushed out some guidance back in 2013 to essentially give us some direction on linear segmentation, which is for anything that's linear will have to be kind of broken up into segments and identified by segments, and that's going to be captured in geospatial records. Each base has got maps, and those maps contain your utility drawings, and that is going to be the source of where this data is. And over time, what we did, from 2016 to 2019, we funded a 4-year contract to go out to the Air Force installations to assist them in essentially linear segmenting their utility assets that were the responsibility of the base engineer. Anything that was privatized, we didn't touch. Those were on the responsibility of the privatized contractor. So we went on this 4-year endeavor to get that segmented. Well, lo and behold, by the time we finished that contract, we discovered that those bases that had been identified for privatization didn't happen. And so we started linear segmentation part 2, and we issued another contract to go out to pursue the remaining 49 installations and 99 systems are included in that contract for a linear segmentation support contract to kind of assist the bases to take a look at their utility maps and to break their utility maps into those segments. Okay, so all that data that's being collected at installation level is now the responsibility of the base engineer. They are required to essentially keep that data current. Whenever they build something new, they're supposed to get that into their maps and digitize and get that all captured. Well, along the same lines, over the last 2 years, the Air Force Audit Agency said, well, you know, we still haven't got it right. Your real property records aren't reflected in your base maps. So over the last couple of years, we've been working towards reconciling our maps to make sure that they reflect your real property records. So at the end of the day, what's going to happen is that your linear segmentation that's captured in your maps is going to be the authoritative data source for entry into the enterprise SMS. So we have been the guinea pigs, sort of working with Searle, trying to figure all this out, how we're going to make it work. And so we've done some testing, Davis-Monthan, Shaw Air Force Base, Hurlburt, just a couple other bases we went to, I think and a lot of this was kind of trying out what was being developed for the fuel side. And so the work continues to try to test the software, to try to break it at installation level, to make sure that all the bugs are worked out, and that eventually it'll be a usable tool that the installation engineers could use to basically handle the management of their assets, to include the inclusion of your builder data. And I guess the good news here is that all the work that you've been doing with builder doesn't necessarily go away. We are testing, we did test, our operational test and evaluation was conducted last year at Moody Air Force Base, and at the conclusion of that, Searle declared initial operating capability. And that generated the version 1.0, and now you're seeing 1.1, which has been some of the bug fixes that went into that. Well, that test involved basically the web application. The software is coming out in 3 forms: the web app, a standalone, and the other one's going to be your mobile application. The idea is, let's get this thing in the hands of the craftsman, that you can operate this on a cell phone, operate it on iOS or Android, and to fit the screens so that you can capture information from your cell phone and be able to upload that. So that testing is going to occur over at Moody Air Force Base this next month. In fact, I'm leading a team over there. Searle's participating, and we're hoping to break through any of the issues that we have discovered, trying to work the application and making it functional and operational for the base engineers. So Moody Air Force Base is the test base for the software. We plan to test it at other locations as well. And this is how we learn how this is going to work. Working with the Searle developers, of course, they wanted to modernize the sustainment management systems. You see that on their website if you go through and read the history. We've been doing Paver since 1970, and since the 80s we've been doing Builder. And so they realized we need a new architecture that's modern, it's fast, it has powerful search engines, and it's cloud-based, so that it would be a really good tool for us to use. I understand that they tried to pull some of the capabilities of powerful search engines, looking at Amazon, looking at Home Depot, and looking at some of the software that was used for their websites. And I think they employed some of those capabilities in this new software. So we're kind of excited being a partner with Searle. We sustain them financially every year. We contribute funding. Likewise, the other DoD services have a fair share into that development, but we've been actively participating in that. We meet with them almost weekly, and they use our resources. We share what we have, and we are experimenting to hopefully try to get this thing right, so that other services like the Army and the Navy can probably use this right out of the box. So that's what I got for an update. Hopefully that, I'll take some questions if you have them, but I just want to let you know that we are, in sort of lockstep in this development, and we're kind of excited that we'll have a new capability. Now, you're hearing about initial operating capability. So what is full operational capability, FOC? That is targeted for 2025. with builder parity in 2023, which means that we'll have the full capabilities of builder built into the ESMS by 2023. And they're working some issues now at the higher levels. OSD is all excited about having a common system used by all the DoD services. It's going to be potentially funded directly from DoD, and that allows Searle to bring on more resources to support their R&D work. But hopefully we'll see this capability in our lifetime and be able to put that in the hands of our installation users and be able to do asset management in a better way. We're excited to use Power BI as a visualization tool, Microsoft Power BI. It's accessible by all DoD users, is all part of the Microsoft suite that you have on your computers, and so they felt that was an easy way of bringing that capability to visualize that data. And the idea of having those built-in reports, that is so cool because they can custom tailor your dashboard to whatever you want to be to see. And if you're an asset manager at the higher headquarters and you want to be able to look at, let's say, your water systems across 15 installations, you can run a report and can do some comparative analysis. So the power of this system allows you to go cross-cutting across many different domains. Right now there's 20 domains being built out to include land, dams, waterfront, and then, of course, the standard buildings, facilities, paver, and then the utility, various 7 or 8 utility classes will be identified in there as well. So get into their website that you see there and kind of explore and take the classes that are available now. And the more you get attuned to the way it looks and handles, you'll be pretty pleased at how fast this works. And to be able to get your phone and go out there and map utility lines on your phone. We tried that at Davis-Monthan and it does work. So we're going to try to test those capabilities at Moody next month, and hopefully we'll get some good results.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, thanks.
All right, so we're taking a 30-minute break. We're going to come back for one more session, and then we'll have our social hour. Again, just to go back to what he said and to recognize that this content was not created by us. Go to the training.sms.erdic.dren.mil, register for the class, send an email to the support team if you want access all the materials out there. But it does require registration unless you have a .mil email. If you have a .mil, you can just log in. Thank you. See you in 30.